Lokati here. Today we are discussing our latest build. All builds are made live on stream, so you're welcome to come by Twitch and ask any questions and watch full videos. Links below. Alright everyone, have you ever wanted to live out your hentai dreams of slaughtering your foes with giant bloody tentacles of death? Got the build for you. We are going to be running a Spine of Malatros centered fissure build with many curses. This is a ranged build that is designed to be moderately tanky and do a tremendous amount of damage. So the first thing we're going to do is hop into a 238 corruption echo here. Playstyle is really straightforward. You're going to use transplant to move around. Transplant will also apply your curses, your bone curse. We want to hard cast curses every once in a while because we want to trigger anguish. And so you'll hard cast Bone Curse or you'll hard cast Wandering Spirit. If it is a single target that is high health, you're going to use Wandering Spirit. If it is a lot of targets, you're going to get more coverage with Bone Curse. And you'll just run around, drop your fissure, Bone Curse, and like everything dies. Most of your damage is going to be coming from bleeds that are applied by the tentacles or by the curses themselves. Both your Bone Curse and your Spirit Plague are going to have the ability to apply bleeds to the target in addition to your fire whips. Now, fire whips are hitting for a reasonable amount of damage, and that's primarily coming from our necrotic res stacking, which we will go over when we're looking at the build itself. But again, most of your damage is coming from the bleeds that you're putting on the target. So there's a big single target. We can dash on him to fear him. We'll dump spirit plagues into him, and then he'll die. And that will be our echo right there. Most of them are going to fly through pretty quickly. Make sure you do keep your wandering spirits up. They are an excellent source of mana regeneration, as well as an excellent source of ward for us through our ring. Now, we're going to go ahead and do a 238 corruption boss as well. So you can see boss DPS here. We'll throw a Harbinger in there so you can see some Harbinger DPS. And altogether, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to stay at range for the most part and spam in Spirit Plagues and then keep the fissure down on the target. Now we are going to want to drop the fissure close in on the dragon because we do have the option of getting both of our fissures to hit the dragon, which increases the number of bleeds on our target. You can see we easily hit the bleed cap here at 999 bleeds on the target, and when we have our fissure positioned correctly. Our damage, like I said, is really solid. We don't have any issues with killing bosses. AoE damage is also really solid. No issues with that either. You want to keep your curses up on the target. You want to keep Spirit Plague spammed on the target for additional bleed stacks. And you want to keep your fissure on the target. We don't have an execute on this build, so you're going to have to hard kill everything. But like I said, the damage is solid. You don't have to worry too much about that. This guy has a lot of nasty abilities, so you want to just get in there, get your fissure on him, bone curse him, and stay away. He'll look at you and do a breath because he inherits that from the dragon. Make sure you dodge that. Other than that, playstyle is pretty straightforward. We took that slam straight to the face. It is perfectly capable of taking hits. This guy has a little bit more movement necessary, so we're not going to get our bleeds quite as high. But it's nice and smooth sailing, playing a ranged character, and not having to stand inside everything. There we go. We'll start dumping some bleeds back into him. And Harbinger dead. Alrighty, so the first thing we are going to talk about is where we're at currently in our build. Now, our end game guide will be below, but as with everything, you need to progress to get up to the end game. So we're going to talk about where we are currently in our progression. We are level 90, so we still have a few passives to get to. All right, so the first thing we're going to go over is our passive tree. We are 20 points into Acolyte, 8 out of 8 for Bone Aura, giving us 160 flat armor, 6 out of 8 for Forbidden Knowledge, giving us Int and Necrotic Resistance, 1 in Mania of Mortality, so that we can get 5 in Unnatural Preservation. This is giving us ward retention and some additional necrotic resistance. Necrotic resistance is one of our primary scalers here, so we do want a lot of that on our build, which is why we have these two nodes. Over here on Lich, we are going 4 out of 10 in Apocrypha for the Int and the Mana regen, 8 out of 8 for Dance of Death, 8 out of 8 for Serrated Bones. This is global damage, bleed chance, and global damage for 8 out of 8 for Unclosing Wounds. We are a low life build, so the health drain per second doesn't bother us one bit. Over here on our Warlock tree is where the bulk of our points are going to go into. We are a Warlock class. 5 out of 8 on Soul Stealer, just for the chance per curse to gain mana on hit. Now we are hitting 4 curses on every target. Those are Spirit Plague, Bone Curse, Anguish, and Acid Skin. Anguish we get from our tree here. Acid Skin we get from our Chthonic Fissure. And then Bone Curse we get from either Transplant or casting Bone Curse manually, or we get it from Spirit Plague. So that is 4 chances, 13% chance per hit to gain 13 mana. Every 3 seconds, we attack 20 plus times per second. We're hitting all. Up here, we are going into Cauldron of Blood. We need 1 in Spiteful Decay to get there. Cauldron of Blood, we want for the Bleed Overload. Every time there's a target with 25 or more stacks of Bleed, we are going to get 15% more physical damage over time to bosses and moving enemies. Very strong mode. Down here, we're going 3 into Ward of Malevolence just to get 3 into Imperishable for additional necrotic resistance scaling. This allows us to get base ward decay threshold per 1% necrotic res. Prior patches in the game, this was not nearly as valuable as it is now because of the way the new ward decay threshold works. And so ward decay scales much faster than it did before. So decay threshold is more valuable in helping you to maintain higher levels of ward. Down here, we are going 8 out of 8 in Harrowing Armor for the armor, the health, and the 4 times 3% more armor per curse on the target. Down here, we are going 5 out of 7 for the ward per second, and the 4 times 2% for 8% less damage taken. Over here, we are going 5 out of 5 in Wither for the less damage taken from Withered. Over here, we're going 8 out of 8 for Ignite Chance, and I'll talk about that when we go over the Chthonic Fissure. Down here, we're going 2 out of 5 for Enemies Anguished on Cast, so that we can get 3 out of 6 for Duskbringer, which is spell damage to curses we don't care about, and number of enemies cursed with Anguish we don't really care about that much. But hitting a boss or rare enemy now triggers the damage from Anguish is very powerful for us because we're hitting 20 plus times per second. Each of those hits on an Anguish target, which is a boss, is going to trigger the Anguish damage. The Anguish damage is going to scale with all your flat, all your global, all your spell damage. And so we're netting 20 hits per second at probably 1k per hit. Very, very strong use of 3 points right here. And 1 extra point here to go beyond so that we can get the nodes over here. We are getting Chaotic Strikes 2 out of 5 just so that we can get 5 out of 5 Wreak Havoc. This is giving Crit Strike Multiplier Global, which is going to scale our Salt the Wound. We'll talk about that whenever we go and look at our items. On our active skills, we are taking Transplant. Transplant is giving us Bone Armor. Transplant is giving us Fear, which is both a good engage and a disengage. Transplant is giving us Ethereal Body, which is allowing us to trigger more Wandering Spirits. It's giving us Doombringer, which allows us to bone curse targets more easily. It is giving us mana through Azure Veins and Pale Blood. And it is giving us some lowered health cost and cooldown reduction in the tree here. Now, if you have 0 mana issues at all, you can pull these 3 points out, put them down into kill threshold so that you can reacquire and execute. But I prefer to have the extra mana. On Wandering Spirits, the only things we care about on Wandering Spirits is cooldown recovery, reveal rate, spirit duration, and then a higher ratio of reveal and cooldown duration, and infusing souls and spectral pretestants. The reason these are the most important nodes are we want mana, we want the spirits to be up as long as possible and have as many as possible, and we want them all to be applying on-hit effects. The longer the spirits are up and the more spirits there are, the more ward we have through our ring, and then the more spirits we generate, the more mana we get, and then the more hits we get in general, the more bleeds we get on the target. So it's a strong node for us, a strong skill for us in general. It's not doing a lot of damage necessarily, but it is a lot of utility. Over on Chthonic Fissure, this is where the majority of our damage is. And the most important nodes here would be getting to Blood Gulch and getting 4 out of 4 Mantle of Flames. Now, if you do not want to take your Ignite node here, and you do not have a really good Spine of Malatros with a lot of skill points on it, then you can sacrifice the Infernal Lash here. And you can sacrifice 3 points out of Mantle of Flames. But what this is doing is allowing us to stack a 4x modifier on our Ignite chance, which is getting 2x due to a Gloom and Flames when we position our fissure correctly, or bleed per second on the fissure hit itself. And so what that means is our 196% Ignite chance would normally be 2 Ignites per hit, but it is instead 16 Ignites per second, which is giving us probably an average of about 40 Ignites on a standing target, if not more. So these nodes are very good, but if you are lacking the equipment department, this is where you can sacrifice down here. We are taking other element duration here, 40%. We're taking this point so we can go over 5 out of 5 for spirit frequency, which increases the number of flame whips that come out. We are getting up Gloom and Flames for 2 fissures. We are taking some mana cost and mana refund here. If you do not have mana issues, these points can be moved to Eradication and Death from Below. Flat damage scaling, like you see on both of these nodes, will affect the damage from the Ignites on the fissure itself. Over here, we're going Pyrochasm to Fissure of Wrath so that we can get Acid Skin and Acid Bane. Acid Skin is a curse, which scales all of our curse effects, and Acid Bane increases our crit chance, and Forbidden Chasm increases our crit chance. Because global damage per second goes to all stats, we have poison damage increased 232%. And this right here means that our Acid Bane here is giving us 23% base crit chance plus 20% crit chance from Acid Skin. Now, again, we are mostly a bleed damage build, but hits from the Chthonic Fissure after it has shredded the target are 3 to 6k. At 20 swings per second, we want those to be crits because it is not inconsequential damage. On our Bone Curse, we are making sure that we grab the 75% bleed chance here, making sure we're grabbing the 100% armor shred chance here. We're making sure that we're grabbing our 200% mark duration here. And these 4 points you can put wherever you want. I like Crippling Anguish because it gives me a little bit more control on the battlefield, but you can go ahead and put those somewhere else if there's another location that you prefer those to be in. Now on Spirit Plague, we are running an Exsanguinous build so that we can run Exsanguination here because we're immune to those bleeds while we're on low health. And Fizzpin with the bleed is a really strong node for the bleeds applied by spamming Spirit Plague. In order to get more stacks of those bleeds, we are running 3 out of 3 in Perpetuity for increased cast speed, and we are running 150% chance to bleed afflicted enemies on hit. This bleed combined with Bone Curse bleed, combined with Chthonic Fissure bleed, combined with base bleed chance is how we get to those 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 stacks of bleed when we can stand unmolested and just cast on the target. So that's how all of our passives and actives work together. Now as far as our items go, Spine of Malatros is the center point of the build. You can play this without Spine of Malatros, but it's not going to work the same. This is what converts our spirits to flame whips. This is what converts our necrotic res, crit strike multiplier. This is what gives us the ridiculous amount of skill points necessary so that we can do everything we can to put this build together. Now, I have slammed increased damage over time and chance to bleed on hit into this thing. I've had very poor luck with this. The build guide will have a much better version of Spine that you can rely on. On our Barbute Clamor, we are wearing that for the necrotic res is ward per second. It also has a huge amount of necrotic res. We have Int and Void res slammed into it, but there are better options for what you put in this for legendaries. We are using a Bone Amulet for the Fizz and necrotic res. We are also using this Bone Amulet for crit strike multiplier. The increased spell damage is not doing anything for us on this build currently, so we will have better options for what this amulet looks like in your build guide. We are using Exsanguinous here with increased spirit frequency and percent armor slammed into it. Those are actually both really solid choices for the build. We are using an ivory ring for necrotic resistance and an exalted necrotic resistant affix. We have increased critical strike chance, which is giving us a little bit more crit with the flame whips, and we have int and endurance threshold on here. Endurance threshold is doing nothing for us, so there are more ideal affixes on that ring. This is what we're working with. The Jorah hates me. I have so many bad 3LP items. This Thorn Slinger should look different. It should have T7 necrotic res on it. It doesn't, because the game hates me. You would want T7 necrotic res and then increased physical damage and whatever resist you're missing. On our Flames of Midnight, we should have T7 necrotic res on this and resistance. I'm way overcapped on Fizz resistance because it grabbed the Fizz. This should be T7 necrotic res, and then whatever missing resistance you have. If you don't have a missing resistance, you can slam damage over time or physical damage. Either one of those will work. We have Assault the Wound here to convert all of our crit strike multiplier into physical penetration for bleeds. Because the flame whips are a spell, they go off of your stats, not like minions. So everything that we get goes directly into those flame whips. We are running Blood of the Exile for the int, movement speed, the bleed duration, the physical element duration, strength for additional armor. These boots are just phenomenal. These are absolutely the best and only boots you should be using for the build. I would recommend you get 2 LP and slam some additional move speed on them, plus another useful stat. Over here, Warrior's Homunculus Blood of Insulation is rolled well. Got high physical damage, high damage over time, elemental resistance overall, and a high necrotic resistance roll with a 35% bleed on hit. This is exactly what you're looking for out of a relic. If you have a well-rolled Acolyte relic, erased Acolyte relic, you could use that as well. For our idols, we are running increased damage over time, chance to inflict bleed on spell physical hit, chance to inflict bleed on hit, chance to inflict bleed on spell physical hit, chance to bleed on hit, increase physical damage. You see a pattern here? These are all of the idols you're going to be using. You have 2 nodes left that you can throw some useful 1x1 idols on just to fill in small holes in your build, but these are core parts of the build. So that's how you're going to manage all of your bleeds. Now, as far as blessings go, I'm running chance to ignite on hit, I'm running lightning res, I'm running chance to bleed on hit, I'm running flat armor, running shred physical resistance on hit, and those will be my offensive blessings here. Now, the shred physical on hit is required. The bleed on hit is required. And the flat armor, for the most part, is required. You can do something else with Black Sun. If you wanted to do something else with Black Sun, you can do the crit multi. If you get a 40% roll here on the crit multi, you can do void resistance if you need void resistance, or you could do spell damage leech to health if you're not running the Exsanguinous build and instead you're using Titan's Heart. On your Grand Bastion of Divinity, really the only useful thing here is the lightning res. It frees up some resistance for us. Everything else in here is something that's not going to be terribly useful for you. If you're running a Sanguinus and you happen to have lightning res capped already, you can run a ward per second. If you're running Titan's Heart and you already have lightning res capped, you can run Grand Rhythm of the Tide for the health and health regen. But the rest of this stuff is very minimal how it impacts your build. Alright folks, thanks for stopping by and watching our video. If you liked what you saw, give me a like, follow, subscribe. Also, come by the stream and say hi. Love to answer questions and help however I can. Y'all have a wonderful day wherever you are.